McGade, and this is a review of Death Wish. Okay, in my opinion, there are only 3 good vigilante movies that's ever been made. We have Death Wish starring Charles Bronson, we have Punisher starring Thomas Wayne, and we have The Brave One starring Jodie Foster. Now, I do plan on getting to review these other 2 movies sooner or later, but for tonight we're going to be discussing Death Wish. Now, this is a very interesting movie to me. It's a 1974 movie. Let me get my notes. Let's see. Yeah, it's a 1974 movie produced by Paramount, starring Charles Bronson, Vincent Gardenia, Hope Lange, and young Jeff Goldblum. The movie was directed by Michael Winner. Okay, so I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. Is this a good movie? Absolutely. For a long time, it was a cult classic. Do I recommend it? Absolutely. If I'm going to scale it from a scale from 1 to 5, I would give it a 4. So, if you're interested in watching this movie, please stop the tape now. Go watch the film. If you've never seen Death Wish, go watch it. It is really good. Alright, because from this point on, I'm going to be spoiling the hell out of this movie. So, if you want a number, like I said, a 4 out of 5. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds, and then I'll start. Okay. Alright, so Death Wish. What can I say? This is a movie about a vigilante. This movie is about is Charles Bronson's character, Paul Kersey, is basically dealing with the loss of his wife and the rape of his daughter. And in this movie, we see an underlying rage that is very apparent that he's going through. There's a lot of emotions involved in him. We get a very strong. It really is interesting because we see a lot of character development done with Paul. We basically see a man who literally is, in his way of thinking, liberal-minded, or at least leaning towards that way, more so. And like most of us, he's very liberal-minded, and eventually goes to pretty much the opposite end of not liking guns, not liking violence in general, to someone that does like violence, that becomes a very violent man, and all intents and purposes becomes a killer. Now, here's an interesting thing about Paul. Like most of us, a number is very easy to throw out there. If I told you 20,000 people died in so-and-so country today, you'd be taking that number and you wouldn't be able to really, you'd see that number and you probably would think something about it, but it really wouldn't hit home. The point I'm making here is that at the very beginning of the movie, he's basically told him that crime is going all over the place, things are going bonkers, and he doesn't take it seriously. Why not? Well, why should he? You know, it's pretty much what anybody would think. Why should I take this seriously? It's not affecting me. And then what happens to him is something that happens to most of us. It doesn't affect us until it hits home. At that moment, it's in our backyard. And what happens to him is traumatic. It's horrible. And you can't really say it doesn't hit home there. His wife is murdered. His daughter is raped and eventually becomes catatonic and is eventually committed because of that. She just can't deal with it. She can't get over it. And this all kind of drives home the point, a point which I'll bring up at the end of this. One of the things I really enjoy about this movie, it ranges in just under 100 minutes, and nothing of this movie is flabby. Okay, it's a movie. It knows the story it needs to tell. It knows exactly the scenes it needs to show, and none of it is used for any purposes other than that. We have the beginning of the movie. It's established on the beach that basically he and his wife have a very close relationship, that they are very much in love. Now, we don't get to see his wife much, but we do get to see his wife. We understand from the second shot in the movie that, and the second scene in the movie, that she has a close relationship with her daughter. We also see the Hooglands that will kill them. And we also see the point that this is how they find out where they live. This is how they follow them. This is what they're doing. The third shot, we get the death, and so on and so forth. It is very well done in that manner. I mean, nothing in this film is flabby. It serves a purpose. And I can't say much, but that's not done much these days. There's a lot of films out there, there's a lot of unnecessary scenes in. And this movie doesn't have any of them. Every scene you see develops either the story or the character. I also appreciate that there's not a lot of expositions just thrown out there. It's assumed. You know, we're not given a ton of reasons, but we are given certain things. Now, an interesting thing in this movie is the philosophy that Paul works under. Now, essentially there is three philosophies in this movie. You have Paul's philosophy, which is basically self-defense. Sort of. And he's the one I'll be discussing in a minute. You have his son-in-law's philosophy, basically when the chips are down, you need to cut and run. And then you have the cop's philosophy, who is Frank Ocean. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Who basically is serves the law and order, but is willing to compromise the law and order if it serves the greater good. So, we don't explore each one of these philosophies in the movie greatly, but they are acknowledged. Now, the one I'm going to be concentrating on will be Paul's himself, the self-defense one, because it essentially is the best. It essentially is the most developed. Now, something I want you to keep in mind is, and I'm going to go through the story a little bit here because I want to make a point with it. After his wife is murdered and his daughter is raped, he's given an assignment to go out to Tucson, Arizona, to survey land for development. There he meets a local. There he meets the local guy, his contact. And his contact's very much a gun-toting, right-wing, conservative, I guess is the best way to put it. But, I mean, there's nothing wrong particularly with that. If you're conservative, that's fine. I have more moderate views on everything. I'm not liberal, I'm not conservative. I'm not trying to get anything riled up here. I'm just making the assumption from what I'm seeing here. And with him, the whole purpose of this scene establishes a few things. First, we learn that he is very well acquainted with guns. We learn that Paul is very well acquainted with guns. We learn that he has a military background. We learned that he was what is it called? We learned that he's a conscientious observer during the Korean War in the medical unit in the West. We learn all these things. Then we learn a line that he throws out. And this is almost a throwaway line. It is emphasized a little bit, but then it's never really brought up again. but it's interesting because it plays a lot into his character, quite a bit. The line he says is he gives a little bit of backstory for himself. Basically, that his father was a hunter that was killed there, and who was mistaken for a deer in a deer hunting accident. Now, and he also states that his mother was the opposite side of the coin. She was very much the peacekeeper, pacifist. And we learned that basically his mother won out because his father died. And he makes the statement that I love my father. I love my father very much. Now, you may ask yourself, why is this such an important statement? Well, in essence, his character development is he goes from a man who basically doesn't believe in violence to a hunter who uses a very interesting way of taking out the prey. Essentially, he goes out and he starts hunting humans. While his father was a hunter of animals, he's a hunter of humans. Now, it's not done the same way, but it's really good as far as character development goes. Like I said, it's almost a throwaway line, but I'm going to emphasize this. So what's the point here that we're getting to? Well, the point is that the way that he becomes a hunter is, let's take a couple of them here. The first act of vandalism we see him do, not vandalism, first act of vigilantism we see is that he actively goes out, he buys $20 in quarters and puts them in a sock. Then he walks out and he makes himself look like a victim. Now this is what I'm getting at. Throughout the movie, he puts himself in a situation where he appears to be a victim. He appears to be somebody that is easy to take something from. He goes out and he buys groceries. He holds the groceries with both hands. He holds a paper open at one point. Why? It means it makes him look vulnerable. It makes him look like an easy target. Now there is one particular act of vigilantism that does come into play, and I will get to that in a minute. But I will acknowledge that in a second. The point I'm making is that every single time, exception of this one, but even that could be arguable, he makes himself appear as a victim. In reality, that's his strongest point, because he's actually the hunter. Each one of his prey fall victim to this. In essence, he uses the psychology against them. That he appears weak, yet he's actually very strong. Now, that's really fascinating in a lot of ways. It's very hard to pull something like that off, but he does it. Now, the one I want to acknowledge is the third act of vandalism. Why is that important? Well, the third act of vandalism that the vigilantism he does, basically is man's being beat down, and a man is being beaten, and he comes in there and makes himself appear as a victim. He makes himself appear vulnerable, to where the fact that he looks like he's a man that has money, and it would be an easier target. That this man on the floor that's being beaten is not much of a target, but this man might be. So he makes himself appear as a victim. The people fall for it, and of course he shoots them all. Now I'm going to have to cut the video right here, but I'll post the second one up in a minute.